Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's keep Week 13 going with Third Age Thursday. Time for us to revisit the familiar and not-so-familiar stories of the Third Age. Now, over the last couple of weeks, we've listened as Aragorn recited the Lay of Lúthien, then retold the history in prose to the slightly baffled hobbits. We also talked about the other appearances in The Lord of the Rings of Lúthien, one of which was Arwen telling Frodo that she has made the choice of Lúthien. For more on that today, then, let's go to the appendices, specifically Appendix A15. Here follows a part of the tale of Aragorn and Arwen. Now, I can't read the whole thing today, but I want to read the parts that connect Aragorn and Arwen to Beren and Lúthien. But when Estel, that is Hope, Aragorn's secret name, was only 20 years of age, it chanced that he returned to Rivendell after great deeds in the company of the sons of Elrond. And Elrond looked at him and was pleased, for he saw that he was fair and noble, and was early come to manhood, though he had yet become greater in body and in mind. That day, therefore, Elrond called him by his true name, and told him who he was and whose son, and he delivered to him the heirlooms of his house. "Here is the ring of Barahir," he said, "the token of our kinship from afar. And here also are the shards of Narsil. With these you may yet do great deeds, for I foretell that the span of your life shall be greater than the measure of men, unless evil befalls you, or you fail at the test. But the test will be hard and long. The scepter of Annuminus I withhold, for you have yet to earn it." The next day, at the hour of sunset, Aragorn walked alone in the woods, and his heart was high within him, and he sang, for he was full of hope, and the world was fair. And suddenly, even as he sang, he saw a maiden walking on a greensward among the white stems of the birches, and he halted amazed, thinking that he had strayed into a dream, or else that he had received the gift of the elf minstrels, who can make the things of which they sing appear before the eyes of those that listen. For Aragorn had been singing a part of the Lay of Lúthien, which tells of the meeting of Lúthien and Beren in the forest of Neldoreth. And behold, there Lúthien walked before his eyes in Rivendell, clad in a mantle of silver and blue, fair as the twilight in Elvenhome. Her dark hair strayed in a sudden wind, and her brows were bound with gems like stars. For a moment, Aragorn gazed in silence, but fearing that she would pass away and never be seen again, he called to her, crying, "Tinuviel! Tinuviel!" even as Beren had done in the elder days long ago. Then the maiden turned to him and smiled, and she said, "Who are you, and why do you call me by that name?" And he answered, "Because I believed you to be indeed Lúthien Tinuviel, of whom I was singing. But if you are not she, then you walk in her likeness." "So many have said," she answered gravely. "Yet her name is not mine, though maybe my doom would be not unlike hers. But who are you?" "Estel, I was called," he said. "But I am Aragorn, Arathorn's son, Isildur's heir, Lord of the Dunedain." Yet even in the saying, he felt that this high lineage in which his heart had rejoiced was now of little worth, and as nothing compared to her dignity and loveliness. But she laughed merrily and said, "Then we are akin from afar, for I am Arwen, Elrond's daughter, and am also named Undomiel." "Often is it seen," said Aragorn, "that in dangerous days men hide their chief treasure. Yet I marvel at Elrond and your brothers, for though I have dwelt in this house from childhood, I have heard no word of you. How comes it that we have never met before? Surely your father has not kept you locked in his hoard." "No," she said, and looked up at the mountains that rose in the east. "I have dwelt for a time in the land of my mother's kin, in far Lothlorien. I have but lately returned to visit my father again. It is many years since I walked in Imladris." Then Aragorn wondered, for she had seemed of no greater age than he, who had lived yet no more than a score of years in Middle-earth. But Arwen looked in his eyes and said, "Do not wonder, for the children of Elrond have the life of the Eldar." Then Aragorn was abashed, for he saw the elven light in her eyes and the wisdom of many days, yet from that hour he loved Arwen Undomiel, daughter of Elrond. Later, he confesses to his mother and eventually to Elrond, acknowledging that I have turned my eyes to a treasure no less dear than the treasure of Thingol that Beren once desired. Elrond, who it must be said reacts far more kindly to Aragorn than Thingol did to Beren, is still not exactly enthusiastic. He says, "There will be no choice before Arwen, my beloved, unless you, Aragorn, Arathorn's son, come between us and bring one of us, you or me, to a bitter parting beyond the end of the world. You do not know yet what you desire of me." He sighed, and after a while, looking gravely upon the young man, he said again, "The years will bring what they will. We will speak no more of this until many have passed. The days darken, and much evil is to come." Now, Aragorn then went out and fought in the cause against Sauron for almost 30 years. He rode with the Rohirrim and served the steward of Gondor under the name Thorondor, the Eagle of the Star. He went by himself far to the east and to the south, eventually becoming the most hardy of living men, skilled in their crafts and lore, and was yet more than they, for he was elven wise. Now, when he was older, 49 to be precise, he stopped by Lúthien on his way back to Rivendell. Now, he didn't know it, but Arwen was there. That's when we read, Aragorn was grown to full stature of body and mind, and Galadriel bade him cast aside his way-worn raiment, and she clothed him in silver and white, with a cloak of elven gray and a bright gem on his brow. Then, more than any king of men, he appeared, and seemed rather an elf lord from the Isles of the West. And thus it was that Arwen first beheld him again after their long parting, and as he came walking towards her under the trees of Caras Galadhon, laden with flowers of gold, her choice was made, and her doom appointed. Then, for a season, they wandered together in the glades of Lothlorien until it was time for him to depart. And on the evening of midsummer, Aragorn, Arathorn's son, and Arwen, daughter of Elrond, went to the fair hill, Caran Amroth, in the midst of the land, and they walked unshod on the undying grass, with Elenor and Nifredil about their feet. And there, upon that hill, they looked east to the shadow and west to the twilight, and they plighted their troth and were glad. And Arwen said, Dark is the shadow, and yet my heart rejoices, for you, Estelle, shall be among the great whose valor will destroy it. But Aragorn answered, Alas, I cannot foresee it, and how it may come to pass is hidden from me. Yet with your hope I will hope, and the shadow I utterly reject. But neither, lady, is the twilight for me, for I am mortal, and if you will cleave to me, even star, then the twilight you must also renounce. And she stood then as still as a white tree, looking into the west. And at last she said, I will cleave to you, Dunedain, and turn from the twilight. Yet there lies the land of my people, and the long home of all my kin. She loved her father dearly. Elrond was filled with grief, and spoke to Aragorn, telling him that even though he loved him, he was not going to allow Arwen to marry him unless he were the king of both Gondor and Arnor, setting him a task only mildly less difficult than Beren's task of retrieving a Silmaril. Now, we will come back to this tale again sometime, perhaps to speak about the mortality of men and the serial longevity of elves. For those of you who are new here, maybe you've heard that elves are immortal. The actual preferred way of describing it is serially longeval. That's Tolkien's own words. For now, though, that wraps it up for this week's Third Age Thursday. We will shift gears completely next week as we come home to the Shire to complete this second series of today's Tolkien Times. Please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show and get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout with me, a bonus weekly episode, and a whole lot more. Please join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times as I welcome another special guest for Fandom Friday. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Please follow or subscribe in your podcast apps and follow @Tolkien Times on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.